Hi there. My name is Belisa King, and I am a licensed professional counselor using my experience with clients and life. I've been thinking about a theory to explain human nature in a general sense. There are many theories and interventions and research done that explains how humans respond in specific ways or environments, but my goal is to have a neutral, agreed upon understanding of how the questions that bother us the most can be answered with acceptance of what we are observing in any given moment. With that being said, I'm honored to share with you my simple approach to understanding humans and some ways that we can work towards a society rooted in love and not fear. I will highlight the fact that the beginning half is just understanding the different terms that I'm going to be sharing, and then the middle portion is going to be a more general concept in a more concise way. And then at the end, we're going to talk more so about community and then do a nice close. Oh, I almost forgot. Please take notes of any questions or challenges that you have during this entire video. Because after the video, you can put them all into the comments and then I can filter through it to add and adjust to this theory, keeping all of your additional perspectives in mind. However, please, no deeply personal or traumatic stories. This is not a counseling session, and I am not liable for anything harmful that results from this video. All right, I am just sharing a perspective and a possible theory for human nature. If you need support, please go seek it. And also, if you're having any thoughts of self harm, please call the suicide hotline at 988 or 911 if you fear for your safety or that of your loved ones. So, fingers crossed, I covered all the bases. I'm excited to go on this journey with you all, and I hope that by the end of this, the world makes a little bit more sense and you can forgive your past self just a little easier. And lastly, for reference, I gathered a lot of these ideas from the Four Agreements written by Don Miguel Ruiz and Doc Snipes on YouTube. So shout out to that. I've been watching your videos for a while, so it helps to kind of put all the pieces together. All right. So before we get started, let's do a quick body prep. All right. So again, I don't want to be liable for anything. So if you are getting overwhelmed, please take a moment to do some deep breaths. I've included a visual here so you have something to refer back to if needed. And you can always come back to this time. I think it's about like 3 minutes, 20 seconds to be able to use the visual and or go back over these instructions. So for the breathing exercise, I want you to breathe in through your nose as the center green gets smaller and then out through your mouth as the center green gets bigger. All right. So right now it's small. So we're going to go inhale. Wait. So the center is getting smaller. So you would exhale. And inhale as it gets bigger. Wait, smaller. Okay. There we go. You can do it as many times as you need, but I'm extremely anxious right now because these always freak me out. So that was a good way to calm my own body. Nonetheless, like I said, feel free to return back to this slide or this part of the video as many times as you need to, because you will not take in the information as well if you're experiencing emotions that are too strong. That is a fact. And if your thoughts are running on a hamster wheel in your head, like mine do a lot, grab something to play with, like a toy, you stuff it, or like a fidget. I always have mine. And name about 10 to 15 colors just to give your brain a break from all the thoughts that are just kind of like going. Oh, and funny made up names only count if they're goofy. Like sometimes I say purple is like I don't know, Pomerasia. I don't even know what that word is, but it just makes me laugh. So laughter is also very helpful if you end up trying to run out of numbers. I mean, running out of colors, then you can just try that. And then because I know it needs to be on the slide, don't forget 988 for suicide hotline and 911 for emergency. My bases should be covered. Let's explore. So to get started, I am going to introduce the foundational concept of human thought for this theory. All right. I do not explore the soul in this theory. However, I do believe that everyone has a certain place on the spectrum of personality, and we find ourselves attracted to those close to us on that spectrum, or those who make it easy for our thoughts to be true, whether they're positive or negative. But again, not going into the soul, that's just my perspective. For this theory, I believe that every human experiences the world through their five senses, right? In other words, your brain only knows what's happening based on what your body tells it is actually happening. So, as your brain receives the information in any given experience, it starts the process highlighted by the magnifying glass here in red. Once you have an experience, your book of belief, your book of beliefs goes through the process of understanding the world, right? And in turn, the situation at hand, in order to feel safe and empowered to protect yourself. This builds off of the fact that our bodies are innately built to survive. An individual's book of belief starts adding pages when they are born, right? And is creating an ever changing collection of pages that stores lessons from experiences that we can sometimes recall as memories, right? You know, sometimes we remember certain things really vividly and some things not as much, right? But whether we remember it or not, it's a belief has been stored. I don't know what it is, but something's been stored, right? And I think about it like every experience either adds a page to your book of beliefs or replaces several unhelpful beliefs. Then here comes a judge. The judge determines if the self is safe or unsafe and options available to respond with, which informs the inner critic or victim of the options available and allows them to select their choice. Or in other words, the victim to the experience is the decision maker. I'll be using the terms victim and inner critic kind of interchangeably to represent just kind of the manifestation of self in the head or that inner voice you hear when making a decision. But I like the term victim really because a victim is defined as a person harmed as a result of an event or action. Not only can you harm yourself as a result of an event or action, but a victim is either going to respond with empowerment or submission. The choice people make is based on so many factors, which we will get into as we get through this video. But if you want, you can consider your judge and victim as your inner critic and self, respectively, if you prefer. Okay. So, to put this into a general context, during an experience, our emotions are helpful for informing us of perceived levels of safety in an environment. But stressful emotions like anger, sadness, anxiety, shame, guilt, and just so forth are not meant to be constant because ideally experiences happen. We survive using the survival instinct process in red and we move forward. So, in understanding that, this theory makes sense because when we have an experience, our brain goes through your beliefs, determines your options to respond in the situation, and your inner critic determines the choice and experience determines which choice it wants to make and experiences a positive or negative consequence as a result of that choice. So, like I said in the last slide, our stressful emotions or stress response is just telling us if we feel safe or not. If we do not feel safe based on the judge's decree, then we set up our protector using whichever option we chose, right? And sometimes we choose the first option that the judge identified based on the level of safety in that experience, right? And that's where you would get like impulse behaviors such as yelling when offended or getting defensive when someone tells me that your statements are wrong, or like a quick hit or punch, right? Whenever you're like, I gotta guard myself, something like that. And these impulse responses are also where you would get the fight, flight, freeze, fawn concept kind of incorporated or woven into this theory. Anyway, something that I find really funny is that we can literally survive or live instead of spending all of our energy on protecting ourselves. Like, honestly, it's training. Imagine if everyone in the world literally did nothing. Just sat down, closed their eyes, and breathed for 5 minutes. There would be no chaos. Now, that's a stretch. I know it's a hopeful statement, but I mean, like, I guess, there's always something that's happening or doing, and someone's always doing something, but just concept wise, if really everyone agreed to not do anything safely at the same time, there would be no chaos. It is when we try to impose ourselves on another entity that chaos ensues. Because the languages ain't the same. Communication cannot be had. However, we are humans though. From last I checked, right? And we can communicate. Again, last I checked. And we can also just kind of sit at a table, figure things out, right? That is where we are blessed with the gift of our inner critics researcher, right? Because should we be able to communicate, right, and sit at a table and talk and have figure things out, right? Our judge would tell us our options based on the book of beliefs. The inner critic would fact check those options using the researcher. Again, sitting down, and then allow the judge to use new information to create a more accurate response to the experience. And then the inner critic can determine if the protector needs to be activated. And now imagine if we did that same process that I just said, right? Like the one that's seen here, with ourselves in every new experience. Well, every experience in general, but particularly the new ones, right? Just walk this road for me. Walk this road with me for a second. My bad. Okay. So imagine someone set themselves down when anxious, right? Which is technically an example of the judge determining that you're unsafe, right? With a stressful emotion, right? Okay, cool. Someone sits themselves down when anxious and said to themselves, what's going on? I would love to help you, but I don't know how. The pages in their book of beliefs include, let's just, an example here. If you don't know already, you're stupid. That's a page in my book. I don't know how I got there, but it's a page in my book. Then that means that the person's judge then responds with more anxiety because they both don't know and don't want to be stupid. And a possible response option is to either attack the unsafe statement, which can look like rejection or blame, right? Or work towards figuring it out. After several times of the same experience causing negative consequences, that individual may come to the conclusion that they will never understand and are stupid. So they stop attempting to learn or just get into the habit of blaming others. So, unless you are exposed to many positive and negative consequences within a given category of experiences, perceived failure may feel inevitable. And eventually, you just lose hope. And so, really think about this here. What hopeless person does research? Right? Do you see how maybe this may help a person empathize with another? Just let that sit. for a minute while I keep talking, or you can pause. But what do you think about that? If you ain't got no hope, what's the point of the research? If failure is inevitable, right? And so, as a person gains more experiences, certain beliefs are reinforced. Again, hopelessness, don't feel like doing it, inevitable, here we go, right? And this is why, like, a healthy, curious, non judgmental guidance or a change in perspective, honestly, is so foundational to healing. Because if you get more options for what safety can mean, then you start to build back hope and gradually become more willing to try to research, which will build back up your feelings of empowerment because you are showing yourself that you can. And as a result, your stress response should subside. Okay? I hope y'all are still with me now. If not, feel free to rewind because sometimes I can be confusing. But let's keep exploring these terms, right? So I consider the researcher to be what is called the thinking brain, right? Where an individual is able to use critical thinking skills, which means that what you think is logical is based on the information you use to defend your point. Your point. Okay. So, as I said in the beginning of the video, right, our experiences give our brain the information through our five senses, right? And our researchers able to review the information given by our five senses more clearly when we are not having heightened emotions, especially heightened stressful emotions. Now, heightened emotions, just in general, let's just stick to that, right? So, before a child starts speaking, right, we're going to talk because this book of belief starts from way, way young, like born, all until you die. Okay. So before a child starts speaking, there are already some pages in their book of beliefs about what is safe and unsafe regarding those five senses or sensory things, right? Like this face of a parent or caregiver, right, means safety. This sensation of being wrapped in a blanket feels safe, right? Or pain means unsafe. So I cry to indicate that I need help and so forth. Then, once a person is able to use language to communicate, they start to learn more about what they're experiencing through the teachings of their community and family. And the generational goal is for the next person to not have to redo the same mistakes, right? Then the human is able to use trial and error in order to review the information from the teachings and the current sensory experience in order to use their imagination to ask questions that will address the safety in the experience. And depending on the consequence in that experience, positive or negative, the book of beliefs is updated accordingly. Then all future actions are judged based on the updated book of beliefs, right? Do you see kind of how this kind of keeps going? All right. But also, right, it's kind of funny how if this was true, right, most people are terrified to ask questions. I find that entertaining. Like, I don't know if anybody's realized this, but in most conversations, it's usually just everyone saying how they feel or what they think, and seldom do we ask questions to clarify, right? We just go off of all these assumptions. So I truly believe that the human researcher in this theory, if strengthened, can heal so many fissures in our society and emotional landscapes as well. Additionally, if you think about it, these are like developmental stages, right? Where children ask a crap ton of questions, like so many questions. You'd be like, why are you even thinking about that? Their imagination, their creativity is at its most pure, right? And so they're asking a ton of questions, and these adults are supposedly the wise ones, right? I'm sorry, wise ones. And family systems can also play a role here regarding environment because that's important, especially if you're only around a certain type of people, then that's the only lessons you will be taught. But that's just a plug for interested parties. I won't be exploring that too much, but I hope in general the concept here makes sense of the book of beliefs, the judge, inner critic or victim, protector, and the researcher. So, as usual, I talk a lot. But I'm hoping that you got a good understanding of the key terms so far. And if you need a better visual, here you go. The ideal way of engaging with the world would be the individual has an experience, right? That's gonna be that one with the seating on the chair in the circle. Okay. Individual has an experience, uses the book of beliefs to understand that experience, right? Then the judge determines safety. You're safe, you're unsafe, and tells them the options available to respond in the experience. Next, the individual's researcher is asked to review the information and options provided before making a decision. Then, the individual has a responding experience or consequence, positive or negative, and the book of beliefs is updated accordingly. In general, the inner critic, the self, right, the victim, stores and records all the responses and is the connector between the cognitive, the mental, and the behavioral self. All right. So this is the ideal way, but what actually ends up happening is that the individual has an experience. The experience is traumatic in some way that did not feel safe or empowering. They use the book of beliefs to understand the experience. Then the judge tells them the options available to respond to that experience. However, this time, because the individual's perceived safety is at risk, the protector is enacted and the energy is diverted to protection instead of research. Or the research is done so quickly and poorly, depending on how unsafe that person feels, that it's really kind of just like running into a library, grabbing a book on cars and trying to write a whole paper on it. Like you got to sit down a little longer, just a little bit. But either way, then the individual has a responding experience, right, or consequence, positive and negative. And if the person experiences another traumatic consequence, then the cycle continues. And the book of beliefs is updated accordingly. And negative thinking, I'll go this way, okay. Negative thinking and emotions are reinforced because the appropriate research was never conducted. In other words, right, let me think. If we feel as though we are unsafe, right, our body can override the inner critic's process and activate the protector. It really can. When this happens, we are less likely to be non judgmental about the information that we're receiving at that moment. And again, the judge will force you to be safe above all else because it is the body's way to ensure survival. Okay? So I hope it wasn't too low there, but no matter what, the researcher is a gift, not a requirement. So coming back to the idea of the researcher though, when trauma occurs, you are so focused on survival that you don't think about everything your mentors, peers, parents, or teachers have told you in the past, right? And you damn sure are not going to try a bunch of different things to prove your belief wrong, because if my belief is wrong, then what is right? And if I'm not right, then how do I know? And if I don't know, how do I protect? And if I can't protect, well, gosh darn it, I am unsafe. All right? So that absolutely does not happen. right? But what you will focus on is what your five senses are able to record about the experience. And this is where Bessel van der Kolk's work in The Body Keeps Score comes into play. Because whether you can remember something or not, your mind and your body are going to experience it differently, right? Because your body needs to take in the information from your five senses to protect itself no matter what. But even if you're not thinking about it, even if you're not using the researcher, it's still gonna do what it's gonna do. Because at the end of the day, nature says, survive, survive. You know what I mean? Yeah. So remember, as a person gains more experiences, certain beliefs are reinforced. So therefore, if a child is asking questions and they trust their teacher and the teacher says something in their book of beliefs as a fact, right? They're not saying this like, oh, I believe this. You know, they're like, um, if you steal, you will go to jail, right? Then that's a hard line, direct connect. And that is not just a belief, but that is fact. Okay. If that's the case, the child will take that belief as fact because, I mean, what other options does it have? It ain't having that much life to live to have all these experiences, right? So it's really nature's failsafe for safety because if I don't have all the experiences, I'm going to take whatever you say and it's going to be the fact so I can use that to protect myself as best I can, right? Because to your body, the only thing that matters is if you are safe or unsafe, good, bad, right, or wrong. All of the dichotomous thinking we engage in naturally to get through life. However, like we all eventually learn, belief ain't fact. Belief is not fact. So when a child has an experience where the teacher's belief that kept them safe when they needed it no longer creates positive results for the child, then ideally the individual or the child here, right, would ask questions, like when they're kids and they ask a bunch of questions, ask questions to clarify the belief or understanding of the experience and move towards a new experience to update their book of beliefs. But that don't happen. Depending on the way that the teaching is relayed, most individuals learn to not ask in order to stay safe, either emotionally or physically. Especially if you grew up with that, kids are seen and not heard, or stop asking questions, just follow instructions, right? That's what we grew up on. Which means that the kid's never able to update the book based on how that experience is for them at that time versus what the teacher's experience was at that time that created that belief, right? And eventually, the individual just doesn't explore an experience, right? They just accept that they are the problem or whatever this belief is fact or that the world is against them. And based on their fight, flight, freeze, fawn, stress response, their protector turns on and we're back in a cycle from the previous lie. Right? So to address this, or let's just say have healthier responses to traumatic events, because we all have them. Life happens. Individuals need to have someone that they trust or have a secure attachment with so they can confidently and non-judgmentally ask questions to allow their judge to respond with better options for that individual, that child, based on their book of beliefs, personality, and values. Then, the individual, the child, is able to fail in their new way. It's always something goofy. Kids are hilarious. But they fail in their own way and move closer towards the best version of themselves. Because the teacher's beliefs are not fact. And if the child is experiencing something that confuses them, it is much better to allow them to figure it out with guidance than to figure life out by themselves and make unnecessary mistakes. Unnecessary. And this is where we would get a ton of conduct issues or disrespect to elders, and eventually just disrespect in general as a baseline, because at some point, this is just how I respond, man. This is just who I am, man. You know, people are funny. Okay, so again, this is another way to think about it. I just like to have a lot of visuals here because I don't know, y'all. And sometimes the way that I'm saying things, the visuals aren't quite going to click. So I have a wide variety of different visuals here. So anyway, if you don't want to, you can just fast forward. But for those who do, let's go. All right. So for this visual, basically, if your experience includes your basic needs being met at the top here, right? Basic needs being met and safety being achieved, then you can feel like you trust the environment. Right? And then if you can trust the environment, then you can feel like your protector doesn't need to be on full guard. Like I can be like, all right, maybe you're a little nervous, got butterflies in your stomach. Like it's not full blast, but it's like, okay. And if the protector doesn't need to be on full guard, right, or use up all the energy, then the energy can be directed towards a researcher. Right? And this results in more new experiences that challenge beliefs and updates the pages as time passes. That eventually creates a book of beliefs that results in only helpful options from the judge and therefore results in a positive life. Another way to I guess to understand this is that, or maybe see this, whatever, but when there is a perceived time with less responsibilities and basic needs being met, let's say a child who has home over their head, has all their food and everything like that, right? And has no care for the world, they're just around having fun. Or an adult who has, all of their basic living needs is being met, their job doesn't stress them out, they don't have too much going on, and they just have more calm time. I'm not saying that they're not doing anything, but just emotionally calm time. Then that person, only under those circumstances, is more inclined to do research and go on the ideal path of human life. However, trauma negates that. So the book is never edited, the stress response is never interrupted. So the body responds accordingly and then ends up being just another experience that reinforces the current book of beliefs. So all these greens don't be greening. you know? And so the cycle continues for every experience we have in our lives. And I believe that wisdom and healing is in recognizing that you can do your own research, right? And you can edit your own book of beliefs. Your inner critic is a connection between your mental and your physical. Critics can be positive or negative, but your inner critic is only going off of what you agreed to believe in. That's the only thing it's going off. This whole cycle is based on a book of beliefs that you have to agree to, right? And if we say things like, you are beautiful, oh my goodness, you are gorgeous, the way that your features just mix it right on up. Or like, you're strong, oh my goodness, you can probably do so many things that I cannot do. Like, I love outsourcing crap. I'm not good at everything. But that don't mean I ain't smart. And you will make mistakes. And you will fail in the funniest ways. Like, honestly, I did this whole presentation with transitions for each of the different parts. But when I started, it ain't show up like that. I could stop it, but like, then I'd have to redo it. And I just kind of got too far at this point. So I'm just like, follow along if you can. And I'm going to create some YouTube videos, have discussions and stuff about this too. But my goal was, I definitely was going to do this a lot neater. Right? But it didn't turn out that way. And that doesn't mean that I suck. That doesn't mean that I'm an idiot. That doesn't mean that I'm, honestly, you could probably say I'm unprepared. I'll probably do that one. Yeah, that's fine. But that don't mean I ain't strong. That don't mean I ain't smart. But it does mean that I'm human. I will make mistakes. And that I can fail real funny like. Depending on where I'm at. Okay? And so if we accept all of the reality, all of it, and we learn from it, because when I do the next one, we're gonna have some transitions, right? Then you can take a seat, breathe deeply, and fact check, right? What exactly made these transitions like not work or whatever, right? Or fact check whatever happens in your situation or your environment, and do better next time. I think that's literally like, yeah, I could totally see that being where growing pains come from. Absolutely. Because you're bound to fail. And if you're not allowed to fail, oh, life's gone. Some lessons ain't learned and life's gonna have to teach it. And that's why I think that, like, protecting someone or not wanting them to go through the hard stuff is not always helpful. But nonetheless, let me just keep going. All right. So now for a really cute example. Again, this would have been so much better with transitions, but now for a really cute example to bring it all home. Our ability of language allows us to have pages of beliefs that hold more complex thoughts than the dichotomous safe unsafe that our survival instinct is based off of. So, for example, if a cat is chasing a mouse, that's like, yeah, I'm powerful, I'm safe because I'm chasing a mouse. The mouse can't get me. Right. Then the dog comes out and it's like, you see that frowny face? I meant to do it like turn, but it is what it is. That's a frowny face. That's like, dog is unsafe. Cat is like, dog is muy unsafe, right? And then all it does, it don't think too much. It's just like, unsafe means protect or activate. Let's call it a day, right? And it just prioritizes run into safety. Honestly, sometimes I won't even care about that mouse no more. Its safety is more important, right? Only until that cat has an experience where something safe happens with the dog. And now the cat might hesitate a bit more. Like the first time, it'll be like you gotta remember this happens over time, right? So maybe like the fifth time, the cat might see a dog and be like, which one are you? Right? And it'll start to question the possibility of a nice dog coming outside when it's playing with the mouse. And then eventually, a dog can come out and it's gonna keep playing with the mouse. Because the dog saying, dog ain't gonna do nothing. I've had enough experiences. Like maybe, I'll then, let's say when they're really comfortable and stuff, then a dog comes and like tries to attack them. Then moving forward, they just have their guard up whenever a dog is around. So they're still looking, but they're also playing with the mouse, because just because the dog is there doesn't mean that it's not safe. So that's kind of a way to think of it as well. And so to move away from animals and go more to people, we don't stop at just safe, unsafe, right? Or just We don't have to wait for an experience to show us, right? We're too creative, and we have this beautiful, 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 beautiful thing called a researcher and critical thinking skills. That's one thing that humans definitely have, different than any other species. I think. I hope. I don't fully know, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. And there are layers to it, and when we're capable of exploring and thinking through things, then we're capable of making decisions that work well, for lack of a better term. However, when there's so many pages intertwined in there, let's say that you're like 50 something and you've had just trauma. Oh my gosh, dude, hurt people, but I digress. So you're 50 something, right? And you're having a bunch of trauma and you're trying to go to your researcher and you're like, well, maybe this person telling me that I ain't no good is wrong. And so you try to reset that, reset that belief. Try real hard to reset that belief. But then all of those past experiences that you've had that supported that belief make countering it so much harder. So at some point, when there's too much trauma, then you lose yourself, and everything the judge says is hurtful because it's got some evidence somewhere. And nothing makes sense. And you can either trust others, maybe dependent people, right? Or trust yourself. And those are like those hyper independent, I don't like nobody, I don't trust nobody type of situations. So you may get to update again, like that book of belief, but it never feels like enough. And then eventually you lose that hope. All right. But if we use that language for empowerment, then we get peace no matter how old you are, right? We can be in the worst situation and find a silver lining. Or feel empowered that you survived and learn a new lesson, whichever way you want to go. But it could be negative or it could be positive, you choose, right? But on the other end, right, when we use that language to enforce our safety because we feel as though we cannot protect ourselves, that's survival, right? Like I have to always curse you out in order to protect myself, or I have to always, use big words so that you feel smaller than. I don't know. People come to a ton of different conclusions. I don't know, but that's just our body trying to survive. That's our mind trying to. That's just all of it survival. But yet, if I recall, we're no longer in need of such tactics as fear. We've come too far as a society, honestly, right? Because what we can't survive, we are actively trying to figure out, right? All the research, all the stuff, all the practices, all the whatever. We don't just stay down. We don't. So therefore, without updated awareness or teachings, we become so insecure that we can't imagine being strong without being better. It makes sense, honestly. So then we rush, right? Because if we're not safe, we're gonna go faster because we gotta be safe, right? So we rush to become the best, the first, the strongest, right? But there will always be somebody better. That's a fact of life, right? So you always have fear lingering in the background, because if your power isn't being better, but you ain't always better, then you're always having something there, and that's fear. right? And just in case, right? It's the next guy over there eating a cupcake, right? He might be the one that might be better than me. Just in case that guy is sitting over there eating a cupcake, I'm about to mess his whole day up. Just screw your cupcake. I don't care about your cupcake. I'm gonna throw that cupcake and maybe I'll pour some juice on you. I don't know. I don't know. But how many times have people overreacted in a situation where you're like, I didn't even do anything? Your existence is a threat. And that's the most bonkers concept. But I get it. It makes sense. You know, because we want to survive. And we don't know what we're even scared of at some point. So we become scared of everything. And so for this little quote at the bottom, I just put like, power doesn't mean being better than. It just means being able to handle any situation to the best of your ability. This is because there will always be someone better. But some can't be true to themselves. If I'm being honest, a lot of people are not true to themselves. They like, oh, I'm this one way, and they act totally different, right? And that doesn't allow them to handle most situations very effectively. And they end up struggling through life a lot worse than you. Because you can handle whatever situation you come through. You ain't got to decide who you're going to be in that situation. Deep it? All right. I'm hoping that made sense, but like in general, as we continue to live through life, our book of beliefs just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And at some point, especially when we're older, we don't have the time or we don't have the environmental security, just so many different things. We can try to break some of those beliefs, but if we've just been experiencing trauma and everything's negative, then that's much harder. And you have to give yourself grace for that. You really do. And I like this little image here with the survival mode because to me it's hysterical. That is a stick figure holding a sword. That sword probably got more lines than this stick figure. Is that true? No, let me not get into that. But you got no bones. I mean, no meat on them bones. And you're trying to go switch swash. Get some meat on them bones. Get some faith in yourself. But we're gonna get there. Okay. So now how I see anxiety playing a part in trauma and in this theory is that when you no longer feel safe or like your needs have been met, right? Your body's stress response is telling you protector. Get to that guard post, bro. I need some. Go ahead, link up over there. Go to your guard post. And if you are not safe, and that means that anything can happen. And the fear of the unknown starts to settle in. Oof, that is a sneaky one. The unknown is the worst thing for the human mind. I mean, if our beliefs need to be fact in order to feel safe, right? Because then we know. And we don't know what is about to happen in order to be able to protect ourselves from it. Then the individual ends up feeling everything strongly. Because that means you need to be on guard all the time because you don't know what you need to protect yourself from, which means you need to protect yourself from everything. I'm sorry, everything. All right. So you end up feeling everything strongly since its body is keeping its senses sharp to be always ready for whatever may come up because we all know what's going on, right? And you will also get rapid fire, fast thoughts because each second is a new experience for you to figure out how to protect yourself. So if you're spending so much time and all of your energy on protecting yourself that there's no time or energy to thoroughly assess the experience for differences or updated lessons, then I mean, how can this not lead to reinforcement of trauma response behaviors that are honestly rarely understood. I think that's a common thing in all my clients and just people in general, but that are rarely understood by the individual themselves, past the fact that they just feel like they had to. How many people asking, well, why'd you do that? I don't know, I just had to. Or like, I just needed to. Or just can't explain none, but it's just they know they had to. That's your body. Yeah. So, with all that being said, trauma negates the researcher. So the book of beliefs is never edited. So the stress response is never interrupted. And that's where we get chronic stress and health issues later down the line. And it also ends up being a pattern of experiences that reinforce the current unhelpful book of beliefs. All right, throwing this visual back up in here, just in case someone really aligned with this one, so I can kind of tie it all together, right? If trust in an environment is questioned, then the researcher doesn't really help. And the individual's inner critic has a much harder time thinking positively or asking questions. As a result, the individual authors an unhelpful book of beliefs for their entire life and end up in a cycle of confusion and self rejection. It's a reality for many, many people, and it sucks. It sucks so bad. I feel you, bro. I feel you, bro. And I'm sorry, but this is probably why. So, um, thank you all for kind of joining me with that. Joining me on the journey through this. Because understanding the different angles and aspects of this theory is really important. It's really important because all of us should be able to fit into this in some way or another. But also, because I did say this is a simple theory, this next part is going to be where I try and kind of like say the theory in a really kind of brief summary point. Okay? So, oh, before I forget, main counseling theories that I did use in this concept were REBT, CBT, DBT, ACT, narrative theory, um, of course, generational trauma, and intersectionality. So let's go ahead and get started, right? So again, this theory, or this is the general concept for human thought that this theory is based on. Okay, we have experiences; they filter through our beliefs that we are constantly updating over time. The judge determines what our options are to an experience based on the book of beliefs that we have compiled or created up until that point in time. The book of beliefs is not a book of facts. Book of beliefs, right? And then the inner critic or the victim chooses an option which results in negative or positive consequences. And that updates the book and that cycle goes. In simple terms, if a human feels safe and empowered, then they're at peace and or can easily find peace in a wide variety of experiences. However, if the human is not safe or empowered, they will enforce it. Remember when I said survival mode earlier? This is that. So if I need to enforce my safety, then the book of beliefs will be reviewed by the judge, right? The judge will determine the possible options the individual can respond with in that experience, and the individual will quickly enact their protector, either emotionally, physically, or both. Again, depending on that stress response thing, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, whatnot. However, if a person is able to use their research and process changes and the stress and process through the different changes in that particular environment at that time, then the stress response can honestly be used much more effectively. Because again, we're human. You should feel all of your emotions, but just because you feel something does not make it true or real. It's just a feeling, right? And so, oh, there's a lot of words on it. Bear with me, but y'all can also pause. Okay, so for most people, the belief is that an individual either uses the researcher or the protector. But you can protect and research at the same time if your general plan is reliable, right? So, for example, those who have experienced trauma or feel so empowered that they have no fear, um, they usually have no need for the researcher and just act thoughtlessly, right? This can be at any age, but if you fear nothing, then exploring things is just kind of a waste, right? I'm fearful of many things. I mean, like elevators, drowning. Like, I mean, there are things to be afraid of because fear is our stress response telling us something is not, safe and stuff. So you don't want to just be not fearful of anything, right? And so the best way to increase research, though, is to increase that individual's motivation for change. All right. And this is where trust that change can even happen and that the effort will be worth it comes into play. Because when you experience so much trauma, you just like, what you mean I'm not gonna get cursed out if I ask my mama for $1? You lie. You a lie. You a whole lie. It's legit. It's there's no wiggle room for it. If you have enough experiences, there's no wiggle room, right? So you have to understand that, because then you have to challenge it. Because is there a way to ask your mom for $1 without her cursing you out? Probably. Can you ask someone else for $1? Probably. What do you need the dollar for? And can you find another way to achieve the same goal without the dollar or asking your mom? Probably. But none of that is gonna matter if I don't think change is even possible. Or that putting in the work is gonna be worth it. So if we want to address that, we have to trust. Okay. On the flip side, though, right? Energy can also be poured into the protector too much that the individual has no more energy for the researcher. So, engaging in mindfulness and being self aware can help an individual see where their energy is being directed to and allow them to choose differently. However, when trauma comes and the lack of safety is never researched, but the protector helps in the moment, then the protector stays active and the need to plan seems obsolete. Obsolete. Seems like ain't no point in doing it, basically, right? And so this ends up resulting in several behavioral issues, honestly. I feel like I want to kind of go back. I want to highlight the fact that, like, for the protector part, you just really want to gain the skills for self-awareness and energy recognition. Because if you feel like you need to be on guard and protect yourself at all times, then that's what your body will do. But if you can recognize that that's not what you need to do, then your body has a much higher possibility of responding differently. Okay. But anyway, back to the next one, right? So this results in several behavioral issues, right? Until that person has an experience that proves a belief related to the protector is wrong, and they end up getting too hurt, right? So for example, if my belief is that whenever people step to you, you better step back, period, no questions asked. Try me, I got you, period, right? One of these days that ain't gonna work too well. Like, no, there's always someone better. And it's not funny because, people really do be getting hurt, and being hurt is not funny, but it's just, unless you have that experience where you're actually getting hurt, you kind of believe that everything you're doing is right and makes sense. So you kind of have to go through it to be able to change course, you know? And this results in most parts, right, into significant distress and just long term, because you got so much confidence built up, and then when you're knocked down, it's like, what? And you get either more mad again, going back to that defense, right? That invoking safety on others. So I believe personally, right? The only way to get out of that mental state is to gradually have new experiences that prove to yourself that you are capable, sociable, and safe. And over time, the unhelpful pages will stop lingering in your head, and life will get brighter. But it will take work and effort on your end. So you ain't nothing that can be done unless you're willing to put in that work. Medication or not. Because medication only helps your body increase its feelings of trust and safety within itself, so that your researcher or thinking brain can start working, right? It kind of calms down the how fast you feel like you need to go. Or some other biological stuff. I'm sure they've got an explanation for that around medication and all that stuff. But anyway, it allows it, whether you have medication, whether you have outside support, whether you have all the resources, all the dictionaries in the world, unless you're willing to do the uncomfortable, you're most likely going to be stuck in the comfortable, no matter how much you know that you need to get out. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. And before I forget though, if you do not feel heard, and this is across the board for every human I've ever interacted with, if you do not feel heard, you will not listen to understand. You will listen to oppose. All humans are that way. So keep that in mind when communicating this theory to others or trying to help your loved ones. Because if they don't want to hear it, they ain't gonna hear it. And if you start off with, hey, you should watch this video because you a hot damn mess. I ain't watch that. What the you talking about? So just take that into consideration. So, but anyway, what would you even tell your loved ones, right? Right? This is just a bunch of confusing mumbo jumbo, and it doesn't tell you how to address it. Please, can you be actually helpful? Yeah, I can. So for you wonderful individuals who are like, okay, I hear the words, I see where your head's going, but what do we do? I've included this next part. I've got a nice little acronym here. AAT. Awareness, acceptance, and think. So, now it's gonna be funny. This is kind of a side note, but I like to think of this acronym as like, when someone's talking, this ain't just a bunch of foolishness, right? You're like, AAT, get it? Before you do all that, do this. Yeah. Anyway, personal thing. But anyway, serious. I believe that wisdom is realizing that life is a series of moments that build up to peace only if you learn along the way. And that realization can come from within or externally. So, for within, you can heal by strengthening your ability to get guidance to research well. This starts with the first A for awareness. This is where mindfulness comes in because you want to be aware of how you are showing up in the experience, both physically and emotionally. That's important. And understand how you are impacting others in the environment. You need all the data, right? And then the second A stands for acceptance, right? You must accept all of the information non-judgmentally from the first step because, oh my goodness, if you like, oh my goodness, they are tweaking, they had no reason to respond like that. Well, you're missing some information there. There's a reason. There's, right? Or whatever they responded, it was their response. You didn't make it up, that's how they responded, right? And so this way, you're not resisting a part of your experience that can help you inform your judge's decree. And you understand the other perspectives of the experience so you can respond in the most appropriate way possible. Okay? And lastly, the T stands for think. A game plan is the best defense for fear. Okay. I think it paused somewhere here, so I hope that it didn't seem too confusing, but I'm just going to repeat it because I don't know when it paused. So I was just basically saying that I believe that every moment, just like the individual, is in their own bubble. Each moment builds on the last, and this is why we're lifelong learners, and every experience has a possibility to be different from the last. All right, y'all. It's been a lot of talking. We're past an hour now. Ooh. I think we were at like 3 minutes and 20 seconds for the breathing exercise. If y'all gotta go back there, feel free to. All right. And if anyone's feeling some heightened emotions or any thoughts of self-harm or anything like that, number one, don't hurt yourself. No. You have a beautiful fire in you. And once we get some of this stuff figured out, it's gonna shine, 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 shine. Oh, and also, but if you're there, call 988. Yeah, because we don't want no, talk to somebody. Get some other information into that book of beliefs so you can work through that. Whatever you're going through. But anyway, I'm now finally on the last part. Whew. Which is really just related to society. Second to last part? I'm not sure. Anyway, last-ish part, which is related to society and community. So within our individual bubble that I just kind of highlighted in the last slide, right? How we understand the world is different for each person based on their book of beliefs. I cannot highlight that enough. Everything that you feel is right just makes sense. Everybody don't think that way because nobody, not even your sibling, went through the exact same experiences as you and had the exact same lessons. That's just not true, right? And so through this lens, instead of thinking of something as safe or unsafe, I would like us to think of an individual's bubble as an unburstable bubble, depending on the majority of energy within that bubble. And I want to highlight majority of the energy because we have days. I have days where I'm not doing it. I'm not going to get out of bed and I don't feel like working. It happens, and you usually take a nap and I feel better because I'm usually just really tired. But we all have our ups and downs. We're all going to make mistakes. So we can't have a bubble with all positive. I mean, even science, I think, like even all positive means that negative, right? So I really want to highlight it's the majority of the energy within that bubble. And for example, right, if a person is constantly circulating positive energy in their bubble, they will experience things more positively, and their bubble boundary is strong as heck. Like, so strong. Like, I want somebody to tell me, Lisa, you're stupid. I'll be like, I thought this was going somewhere. Like, you got something. Like, I know I'm not. So is that just, are you just saying that? Because then I could just leave. Because that's untrue. I know that you feel the way you feel. Goodbye. You know? Like, all right. But anyway, that's only if the positive, right, is the majority in that bubble. But conversely, if they think, if they are thinking more negatively, then their bubble boundary is much weaker. And it's easier to be influenced by the language and actions of others. So if I had a bunch of negative all up in here and someone says, Blaze, you're stupid. If I already speak negatively to myself or believe that I'm stupid, my judge can't deny the statement. But being stupid is also bad. So you kind of reject the idea and whoever accused you of being stupid, and your protector goes up as you consider all of the ways that you are or are not stupid. And that just kind of lingers on your mind for like ever and ever and ever, right? As opposed to just being okay and brushing it off. Because your judge finds nothing to support that, you know? And so you can choose to communicate and figure it out, right? Like, why are you feeling like you need to tell me I'm stupid? Like, what's going on here, right? If you want to take on that role of teacher, guidance, and whatever, or you leave that person alone. Whoever called you stupid is going through their own stuff. They really are. Let them be. Unless you have the capacity to put that work in. You know, but do so safely, because some people be real creative with their revenge and they're seeking power by enforcing it on others. It just gets real crazy sometimes. But anyway, um, but either way, beliefs are not another person's responsibility to change. And you are allowed to proceed with your life how you see fit, because you're never going to be eye to eye with everyone in the same way. And just a little plug here, y'all. If anyone wants to create a nice, like, moving visual of the bubble and the barrier with the positive and the negative, that'd be really cool. I didn't feel like investing that time, but that'd be wonderful. But either way, imagine with negative, that boundary, that barrier gets thinner, and with positive, it gets thicker. So therefore, reinforce or disempower that wall. And the thickness of the wall is, of course, your ability to protect yourself from whatever the case may be externally. However, yeah, okay, cool. However, because most of us are not taught how to manage our emotions when we are younger, or we are made to believe that majority of our teachers' beliefs are facts, right? Because we know that beliefs are not fact, but we're made to believe that majority of our teachers' beliefs are fact, therefore we cannot ask questions. We tend to struggle with self-love and think that others are out to pop our bubble and hurt us, right? When in actuality, others are unable to pop our bubble unless we weaken our bubble barrier. But because we think that we got to protect ourselves from the inner critic of others who have had different experiences and beliefs, honestly, we tend to push people away, which is not good for humans. Because not only are we built for survival, we're also social beings. And if we push everyone away, I mean, more negative is only bound to come. But, you know, I also believe that just as each individual human has their own bubble, Each community has their own bubble as well, right? So it kind of just keeps going bigger and bigger, 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 right? And community bubbles also hold the same principles of the positive and negative impact to that bubble barrier. All right. So if you look at this jar of water beads on the right, you can see how each bead has its own size, shape, color, etc. Right? The bigger ones don't crush the smaller ones, and they can all be in the bowl without issues. But when we're living in fear and pushing against one another, it's not like the bowl is gonna stretch. Like, we ain't gonna find more land out. I mean, well, Mars. But it's a circle, bro. You can't just keep digging and stretching and expanding. Like, it just, no. And the bowl is gonna stay the same, but the marbles are now pressed against the bowl. I wonder if I can do this with the video. Hold on. Right? Pressed against the bowl and feeling crushed and crushed and crushed. And feeling crushed will increase your fear. Because if you're crushed, then you must not be safe, right? And the need to push others away increases, which will only continue to make the situation worse because it started from pushing. So then now you have a bunch of negative, fearful bubbles all up in this big, big bubble that is creating just a bunch of more negative energy in this bubble of community. And the energy shifts and becomes vulnerable. And the community becomes vulnerable, right? And that's if we all fear, push, negative, weakness for the boundary. I hope that makes sense. If not, type it in the comments. Okay, cool. But without research, right, we are unaware that we are creating what we fear, right? And being pressed against a glass definitely makes you feel like all you can do is break the glass in order to alleviate the pressure. So the protector is never able to rest because you cannot break the bubble or the glass. You can't. You can't. However, if we were to focus on the positive in our own bubble, ideally everything else naturally will self-correct because our emotions tell us if we feel safe or unsafe, not if we are safe or unsafe. Therefore, your emotions cannot dictate what is just. In most cases, the consequences and impacts are a much better indicator of what is just. It is not just to keep crushing people on the glass. It's not. Focus on you, I focus on me, and when we get together, we will make harmony. But again, all of this is much easier said than done, and I recognize that. So now if we're talking about all these are bubbles and circles, right? Then we gotta go up, 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 all the way out, right? And this is where I think religion comes in. Because the fact that the individual can believe that their bubble barrier is theirs to reinforce is an option, right? Like if I'm all positive inside, right, I can make it real strong and we good. However, on the other end, some people may just be struggling with the positive inside, or just their teachers just told them about higher power. It's gonna happen a lot of different ways, but they reinforce their bubble with faith from a higher power, right? Because either I got me, positive inside the bubble, or God got me, strong, reinforced by another entity. But either way, I'm safe and empowered at the end of the day. So whichever you choose, run with it. But it is not helpful to say that one is right or one is not right. Because as long as you feel safe and your bubble is secure, keep it pushing. Right? And slamming nobody else on these walls. I also want to highlight though, that saying the bubble barrier does not pop does not mean that a person is invincible to physical harm, because that's a comment I don't want to see. If I'm being 100% honest, our skin is skin, knives cut. Like, I mean, things happen. You're not invincible to physical harm. This is more about resilience and mental kind of setup, right? In a situation or experience to be able to navigate it. So, with that being said, I'm not just saying that, ooh, if you think positively, nothing bad can happen. That's not true. Bad things are usually based on perspective, and they happen every day, every second. But if you can think it through, get through it, find the best response and answer for yourself, and just feel confident in your ability to save yourself whenever the time became necessary, then you're pretty resilient. You can make it through most situations. And the likelihood of you getting caught up in anger and animosity or fear and someone trying to harm you just becomes less. It just does. And then regarding, especially with the higher power part, I forgot about this, but if you feel a connection to something outside of this human life circle, right, or human life bubble, then that's because you're communicating in your own way through the bubble barrier just enough for that connection to make it through. So you can think of it like a positive, negative attraction. You attract those that match your energy both in and out of the bubble. But either way, whether you believe in a higher power or not, it's all connected to the flow of good, bad, positive, negative energy, and you will get what you produce. Again, you will get what you produce. So choose wisely. All right. I'm really almost done, y'all. For the last part of this video, I have first included a stream of thoughts that I think also summarizes everything that was broken down. This is, my brain was just kind of purged out on here. You can pause it and read through it, but I'm also just going to read through it for fun. It says, like, people fear the research because what if the pen pokes a hole in the shield and my shield isn't as strong, right? And uncertainty or unknown that I used early in the presentation is fear, right? So fear is countered by a plan because a plan creates safety and empowerment. So if you start with plans for small fears and build up from there, there ain't no ceiling. Just keep on going, right? And faith is knowing that there is always a way to create a plan to achieve the overall goal. Healing is recognizing the reason your previous plans didn't seem to work at that time and adjust the plan for the next. Right? Right? Even if your skin's cut, it'll heal back. Right? But you just gotta protect it, you know? And do better next time, not cut it again. Right? Peace is accepting that not all people have plans and not all plans work out. Now, this connects to those expectations, right? Living is finding a blueprint for planning and sharing your my bad, but your perspective non-judgmentally with others as requested as you enjoy your creativity. You just live your life. Like, I'm just let you know if you want, but I ain't got to. I'm enjoying mine. Right? And joy is going through life with the security of the plan and feeling empowered through the ability to plan, not eliminating what you fear. Again, if you try to eliminate everything that you fear, you will always fail. Period. Don't try to eliminate what you fear. just increase your level of empowerment. Okay, but you can take your time reading through this, but thank you so much, y'all, for exploring this with me. Please leave a comment below with your thoughts and questions so I can continue to refine this theory. I know that this is a very long video, dang, almost like an hour and a half, but I think this bleeds into so many different things, and I hope that it helps at least one other person love themselves a little bit more and forgive much easier so you can move forward in life. Also, this theory should not in any way, shape, or form invalidate any other theory, but should create, my bad, my watch. Okay, but should create a space for all of the theories and experiences to make sense in one way or another. Because if we understand even a little, then we are more inclined to accept all of ourselves and live in a life rooted in love. Just love. Love feels so nice. And it's even nicer when you can control it by loving yourself. Guarantee it. It saved my life. But also I'll be creating a follow-up video with counseling interventions you can use to help a person gain a better understanding of their book of beliefs. And I'm also still developing it, so I'm sure there's gonna be more later. I don't know when I'm gonna upload that, but just a heads up. And I'm also hoping to create some chapter titles and break up this video maybe for ease. But definitely don't hold me to it because I might get distracted. Yeah. I usually get distracted. And then I have one last slide just to kind of bring some things together. Okay. So if you take nothing else away from this video, and I wanted to make sure this was at the last slide, I want you to get used to asking yourself these questions. Whether you believe this theory, whether you agree with it or not, just try this, right? And let me know if it was helpful, please, in the comments. I'd be greatly appreciated. So everyone is responding based on their own book of beliefs. So before you assume, you can ask these questions, set boundaries with yourself, others, and do what you need to do to protect your individual bubble, even from family sometimes, because family can hurt us the most, and sometimes we just need space, right? But that doesn't mean that you abandon when you do have the capacity to help. That's circumstantial. Ask your counselor. Don't ask your counselor because we cannot give advice, but go through these questions. Yeah, go through the questions. Okay, cool. But what does it look like? Right, so if we go through these questions, let's say that I failed a test, right? That's the experience here. I may feel both sad and disappointed with myself because, excuse me, the audacity of me to fail. What? How rude. Anyway, but disappointed with myself, right? And my thought would be that I should have done better. Okay, that's, yeah. Right? And my expectation may be that now that I didn't pass, I won't be able to achieve my goal. I feel like I would reverse that, but you can play with it either way. But yeah, and I didn't pass, I wouldn't be able to achieve my goals. So I fact check, right? I take each statement and do a true false test, right? I should have done better. That's circumstantial, right? Because what are all the different factors that resulted in me having this outcome? That's a stretch, right? So in reality, I should not have done better because based on what I knew, I did the best that I could. Okay. I also know that not passing this time doesn't mean that I won't pass ever. It also doesn't mean that I'm incapable of achieving my goals. It may mean that I just didn't study enough, or I was too tired to think clearly, or was too distracted due to personal stressors, or that this may not be my time and I have to strengthen some skills first. Either way, the updated expectation can be that if I don't pass this test, that I have to reassess and try again. Now, you're not feeling like you have no power to change your situation, and your body feels a little safer. That was just a walkthrough of it. I hope that helped. And I really don't do social media much, but if the comments get out of hand, I'm gonna try and see another way that I can have this forum discussion, maybe like a podcast or something. I'm gonna see because I truly, truly, truly enjoy having conversations about this. And if y'all can prove me wrong, or if this doesn't make sense, please, I am truly asking and authentically asking for you to tell me so that I can edit it, because my brain is filled with just a bunch of just jumping. It's just it going. So things that might make sense to me won't make sense to the next person. But that doesn't mean that it can't. So thank you. And I also want to emphasize that I don't know y'all. I know some of y'all. Hey. But I don't know all of y'all. All right. So I am not your counselor. And if this opened up some stuff that you want to explore, please, please, please find a counselor or bring it up in your next session, because you might need some more teachings to be able to help you work through this. And lastly, this is the last slide, you deserve to understand yourself and your experiences. And I wish you all the absolute best of luck. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I'm beyond honored. Thank you. And I look forward to continuing the conversation with y'all. Bye.